In this video, I'm going to cover some of the changes on our U-Series flow selector boxes and go over some of the changes from our previous generation E-Series boxes. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the new U-Series flow selector boxes, go over the new features, and go over some of the changes from the E-Series over to the U-Series. Before we get into the new U-Series flow selector boxes, let's go over our current offering. So this is the E-Series flow selector box family. We have our single port and we have our multi-port flow selector boxes. Our single port boxes came in a standard and a long flow version. So our standard could do 49 feet from the box to its indoor unit, and then our long flow can do above 115, I think it was 115 feet from the box to its indoor unit. And with our multi-port flow selector box offering, we had a 4-port and a 6-port box. So we're going to keep the E-Series flow selector boxes around for our single-phase E-Series heat recovery systems. So for our 6 and our 12-ton single-phase heat recovery, they're still going to use the existing E-Series flow selector boxes. So those are staying around, but we plan on replacing the E-Series single phase heat recovery with a new U-Series, and that'll be coming by the end of this year, 2024. So let's dive into the U-Series flow selector boxes. So talking about some of the new features, we have an all-new single port box. We have an all-new multi-port flow selector box that come in a 4-port, 8-port, and a 12-port configuration. New for the U-Series is that no condensate drain is required. So these new flow selector boxes are insulated, so there's no need to drain away that excess condensate if it builds up. And we use new PMV valves or PM valves instead of solenoids. And what that does, it allows for the flow selector boxes to operate a lot more quietly. There's no more physical opening and closing of solenoid valves. You just have an electronic valve opening and closing to allow refrigerant to flow through. Specifically looking at the changes from the E-Series, let's look at the single port flow selector box. First off, these are not compatible with the previous generation E-Series. Once you go U-Series on the flow selector boxes, then everything else has to be on the next generation. The reason being is that the communication, the units won't be able to communicate if the flow selector box is the new U-Series. Everything else is backwards compatible, but once you go with the flow selector boxes with the new generation, all the equipment has to be new. There's only 2 SKUs for the single port flow selector box. We have a 5-ton and below, and we have another model for 5 tons and above. So that drastically reduces the number of SKUs. It's less confusion, especially with we've standardized on the single model in terms of the line length. We don't have a standard and a long flow. We just have the one model on the U-Series. So now we're just down to 2 SKUs, 5 tons and below and 5 tons and above. And with the refrigerant piping, we can do up to 115 feet on this one model. We don't have the 2 different models depending on the refrigerant piping length. Another change from the E-Series is that the new U-Series flow selector box, the single port, will require its own source of power. Previous generation, the E-Series, the single port box, it was able to get its power from the fan coil that it was connected to, but now it requires its own source of power. Another change, and this is just with the single port box, the single port flow selector will not have a connection for the liquid line. So if you look at the slide, the single port flow selector box has only 2 refrigerant connections coming from the outdoor unit. That's your suction gas pipe and your high pressure, low pressure gas pipe. So those 2 pipes will go directly into the single port flow selector box. And then from that box, only 1 refrigerant connection goes from it to its indoor fan coil. The liquid line goes from the outdoor unit, it bypasses the single port flow selector box and then goes directly into the fan coil. So this is a major change in how the single port box is piped. It's the as you'll see, the multi-port flow selector box, nothing changed in terms of how it's piped, but this is something to keep in mind with the single port box. Looking at the dimensions, you'll see that the new U series flow selector box, they did grow in size in terms of dimensions, and that's mainly because of the power supply. It has its own power supply now. It doesn't depend on the indoor unit, so that's the reason why the dimensions change to get bigger on the single port box. Here's the wiring diagram in terms of the communications for the new U series. You'll see that the communication goes from the outdoor unit to the indoor unit, and then it kind of daisy chains to the next indoor unit. And then each indoor unit has its own AB landing point on its terminal board, and then that will connect to the single port AB terminal board on the flow selector box. Moving on to the multi-port flow selector box. Again, these are not compatible with the previous generation. Once you go new, you can't go back. We have 3 SKUs for the new flow selector boxes. For the multi-ports, we have 4, 8, and 12. Essentially, the 8 replaces the 6-port box. We no longer have a 6-port box, but in its place, we now have an 8 and a 12-port box. As I said before, the multi-port box will have 3 connections, so nothing changes there. You'll have your standard 3 refrigerant lines going in, and then for each port, you'll have 2 refrigerant lines going out to each associated fan coil. Each set of ports on the indoor unit side has a maximum capacity of 5 tons, and you can pair 2 sets of ports that are next to each other. You can combine those to have a maximum capacity of 10 tons. Here are the dimensions for the multi-port flow selector box. You'll see that in general, they got a lot smaller in terms of the width and the depth, but in the height direction, they got a little bit taller, but in the other 2 dimensions, they got smaller. And then looking at the wiring diagrams for the multi-port boxes, it's the same as the single port boxes, but you'll have on the indoor unit going to the multi-port flow selector box. On the box itself, it'll have its own AB landing points for each fan coil. So there's going to be, so in this example, we have a 4-port box. It's going to have 4 different landing spots for each fan coil. So you're going to have to land from indoor unit to the associated landing point on the flow selector box. Thanks for watching this video on our updates on the U-Series flow selector boxes. Please stay tuned for the next module covering our other updates on the U-Series. Thanks again, and I'll see you all in the next video.